Hey there, amplifiers. When you're in the midst of being in the business, in the trenches, it's really hard to see where you're at. It's hard to get that fresh perspective. We all have a blind side, and today we're going to be talking about how to see your blind side in business. We've got a wonderful guest who has an experience and knowledge really helping business owners see the blind spots that they have in their business and how to get around them, how to get ahead of them so that they can strengthen their finances and build a profitable, successful business. If you haven't done so already, make sure that you're subscribing to Growth Amplifiers. You can visit us on YouTube. We have the best tips, tools, and strategies for growing your business, elevating the value and experience you provide. We're aiming to give actionable insights for you to sharpen the saw, continue to amplify. So a couple of weeks ago, I was attending a conference down in Orlando, Florida, and I was watching a basketball game for a little bit, and it was out in the court, and these girls were playing basketball, and they were doing a pretty good job. But I was noticing, man, it's hard to keep track of everything when there's so many people on the court and you're in the middle of the game. I never really got into a lot of sports when I was a kid. I got more into art and music, but I was impressed by these ladies' skills, but even sometimes they would make mistakes. And then I went up to my room, and as I was going up to my room, I noticed, wow, look, I could see right over the court, and I can see how things are moving completely differently. I've got a completely different perspective. And so that's what can happen is if you're in the game, you can't see it from a fresh perspective. Sometimes you could use a guide, someone who could give you a bird's eye view and tell you the things that you may not be able to see because you're in the middle of it. And so our guest today is the president and CEO of ProWise Financial, Eric Lievenhagen. He's helping independent companies save taxes, increase profits, and results are even guaranteed. He's an excellent coach and advisor, and I'd like to welcome Eric to Growth Amplifiers. Eric, thanks for joining in.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kenny. Glad to be here.
So, know a little bit about your background. If you could tell guests as they're tuning in just a little bit about your path to get to where you're at today. How did you get to do what you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. So, I've always been interested in business since I was from a young age. And I guess I was fortunate to find out at a pretty early stage in life that I was pretty good with the numbers and with accounting and with taxes and kind of areas that a lot of people that I was around at the time and still are around today kind of find confusing at times or just difficult to make sense of. So I went down that path. I wasn't in the accounting industry very long until I noticed that there was this huge problem, and it existed, over 20 years ago. It still exists today. Is that a lot of CPAs, a lot of advisors, how they're doing good work, but a lot of them seem to have the wrong idea about their role on that business owner's financial team, right? Most are focused on the compliance aspects, crunching numbers, filing return by appropriate deadlines. And these things are important. I don't want to discount that at all, right? We all need to have our taxes filed. We need to have our books put together in an organized fashion. But, most of them after that, they just call it a day, right? Think if this is an analogy I use, think if your doctor did this with you, right? If you went in for, not because of emergency or something's wrong, just for an annual doctor's visit and annual checkup. And you walk in, they take your vitals, so they check your weight, height, take your temperature, blood pressure, maybe they draw some blood for some tests. And then maybe the doctor walks in, maybe not. They hand you the results from the tests, and then you just leave, And it's like, okay, I've got these reports with great, with these little numbers on there that means something to and probably something important, and could be something drastic to my overall health. I don't know if I have a problem brewing or not, but I'm going to pick out the 2 or 3 that I feel are important or that I've heard before, and so can contextualize and think, obviously that doesn't happen, but if that were the process with going to the doctor, it'd be like, that's what we'd be left to do, is just kind of guess or just look at a very small piece of the picture. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I remember going to the doctor myself and getting the physical and getting the report back. And for the most part, I was very fortunate and saw like everything was working out. But there was a couple things that had the little indicators like, this is something that might need to be looked at. And I was like,
Right.
Jace, I kind of want to know what's going on there and what I should do about it. It's very important.
Exactly.
So being that that's the challenge, right? Which, by the way, if you haven't subscribed yet, this would be a great time to do this. That's the challenge that people are maybe not getting this insights. Can you dive a bit deeper on, what that lack can cause, and then maybe some ideas for how to get around that challenge?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, so like I said, bookkeeping, taxes, those are important. Taxes and financials are essentially your kind of organized, they're your vitals, as we continue that analogy, but also, I mean, they're organized raw data, right? It's not complete raw data. It's not the transactions. It's your transactions and other items that have been organized. So I guess really the ultimate goal is to be able to interpret that raw data, to set a strategy, make decisions that are going to be, make your business more productive, more efficient, and at the end rewards you as the business owner for running a profitable enterprise that can help more people, right? There's an inherent reward that comes with that, both financial and non-financial, but we're talking about financial today. So that's, what we very aware of both sides of that. So, financially, we talk a lot about financial health of a business, and that's a lot like a healthy body, right? It takes a number of systems working together in harmony to stay healthy and to optimize performance. So a lot of times what we're helping folks do is cut out maybe 5-10 years of time of earnings potential and power for a lot of our clients. I live in the world of professional service providers who own their own business, and a lot of times they're in business for themselves. Maybe some of them have partners, most of them are own the business themselves, sole owners, and they have employees to support. They're supporting a family, growing a family. That business is most of the time sometimes they're only, but a lot of times their major source of income is their biggest wealth accumulation tool during the prime of their career, right? So they're looking to make a big difference, not only on the people that they serve, but also for themselves and their family and their generational wealth. And so being able to really optimize that performance, because you only have a short window, right?
It's true. It seems to fly by like lickety split. Seems like just yesterday I was just entering into my 30s, and then blink, that decade's gone. I'm like, wow, that was pretty quick.
Yeah, right. So I thought that through my 20s and my 30s, and I'm thinking it through my 40s as well. But I liken it to professional athletes, where their window's smaller. But a lot of times when we're in the middle of it, and we talk about people, and we hear about people having 20, 30, 40-year careers, whatever the case is in business in some sort, it's easy to kind of lose that context that, hey, you've got that time, except for, like you or I, like we may have 40 years. I'm already halfway through that,
Right.
So keeping that into context. And so to know that there is some, if you want to accomplish what you set out to, and you want to hit those goals, you want to start sooner rather than later, because like I said, it's going to be over in a heartbeat, or seemingly when you're looking back at it. The other thing though, so that's like the good side, and the optimization side. And a lot of times some folks are at the level where they're not worried so much about optimization. They might be listening out and thinking, gosh, Eric, that sounds great, but I'm having trouble. Like I just got nailed with a huge tax bill a couple months ago or last month or on extension. Still don't know what the heck it's going to be. maybe you're in that boat, or, we just have trouble. Some folks still having trouble guaranteeing payroll every couple of weeks.
We
You know,
got the good old inflation right now that is changing
yeah,
everyone's landscape.
yeah, economics are changing, which is affecting folks' businesses, and we need to be able. Those are not necessarily things we can control, but we need to adapt to, and so this is the time, where as economic the economic picture changes. That's the time where we find out, that's the stress test for your business. We find out if you're growing and building a sustainable business model from that, because a lot of people can survive in the good times, and not that we're in like terrible time, but it's fluctuating, right?
Right.
So, and then better to hear that now than when, if we do take a major dive, or, full on recession, or whatever the case is. The things come in cycles. It's always going to happen. What the current, or the typical economic cycle is, about like 10 or 12 years. And so every 10 or 12 years, we got to be prepared for it. But that preparation comes within those 10 or 12 years, not the day after it breaks on the news.
I knew a gentleman who had a company, an advertising agency, and he was doing really good when the market was obvious. And this was his best client was in real estate. This was like 2005, 2006, 2007. He was just blowing up.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't have a way at looking at his business. He didn't plan ahead. And so when that crash came, boom, it punched him really hard, took his business down. And I'm not doing that to scare everyone who's tuned in, but saying, he should have been looking at a holistic plan to
Mm-hmm.
protect from that potential change in his business, because he wasn't thinking ahead, because he didn't make that plan. He ended up losing his business, dealing with all the anxiety and the stress that came along with it, and taking a job that made him feel like he was sacrificing his soul. Long story short, we got to be thinking about what are the solutions, right? We have these challenges, things that we can avoid, things that we may not even know that are problems around the corner. So what are the things that people can do to start being more mindful and preventing themselves from the potential challenges that lie ahead?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, there's the overall strategy, because then we can, start with the strategy and dive into tactics perhaps, but there's a lot of tactics, right? There's a lot of things. Business can be complex at times. And so the overall strategy is, like I said earlier, taking that raw organized data and turning it into actionable set of, it's an information system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to derive actions from it to allow us to know what decisions need to be made, what's going right. It's like, what should be happening that's not, and what has happened that shouldn't have happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of those things, a lot of times I tell folks, we help, and there's systems that are built from everywhere from the moment that just before the revenue hits the door, meaning as you're selling or producing, generating revenue, even before you collect it, all the way until, hopefully we'll go through, kind of like I usually talk about it as being like a gauntlet of activity that's trying to strike that down, or take chunks of it away in different forms until it comes out to the end, not as bottom line on your P&L, but it comes out a step further, which is positioned in a way that you can leverage and secure your financial future and or the financial future of the business itself, right? So there's a lot, like I was talking about systems before, there's a lot of systems in the middle of that are beyond the bookkeeping, right? Or beyond filing a tax return. So we know that, cash flow is a huge issue. Most businesses fail, and actually SBA did a study not too long ago that said that what was the number, like 83% of small businesses in America are struggling to pay their bills, cash flow wise, right? And they have cash flow struggles. A lot of business owners, or a lot of businesses, if they didn't get collections or revenue in the door in a week or two, they'd be hard pressed to pay to keep the lights on, keep the doors open, right? Or they have to go into debt, or they have to pull in money from somewhere else. So cash flow, cash is king. We all know that. But putting in a system in place, so it's one of many, right? Putting in the system in place is going to capture not only cash flow, but capture free cash flow. Because at the end of the day, that's the excuse me, that is the ultimate goal of what's going to provide for self-funding your growth, for rewarding yourself as the owner, for paying your taxes. Even though we talk a lot about tax strategy, which is going to be another one of the systems, but we could do a lot on tax strategy. The point is, or the bottom line there is, if you are in an operating business, working to make money in America, you're likely, there are some exceptions, very few, you're likely going to pay some tax, right? It's just, we're not going to get you to zero while you're working, but we can minimize that very well. And, by just maximizing what's in the law for business owners, big and small. There are core strategies that apply to every business owner, no matter if you're just starting out or if you have been in business for 20 years or more, right? There's these core pieces of the tax code that every business owner should be looking at. And then once we get beyond that, we need free cash flow most of the time to be able to capitalize on more advanced tactics and strategies that can also carry a really big impact. So kind of working all this together, right? We fix the cash flow. We start taking a deeper look at the financials and what those are actually telling us, so we can spot, hey, do we have cash gaps? Are we growing at too rapid of a pace? Are we going to outgrow ourselves? Are we not using our resources, like our assets or our people or our workforce well enough? There's all these pieces that got to be balanced. As we grow profitability, the next natural issue that's going to come up to bat down is the tax piece. And we need to get beyond that before we can be left with actual free cash flow, spendable cash or disposable cash that can go into one of those directions, right? There's always four major uses of free cash flow, which are rewarding yourself as the owner, paying down debt if you have bad debt or short-term high interest debt that needs to go away. There's self-funding your growth, building reserves, I should put that first, and then self-funding your growth, right?
Hey there, this is Kenny from Growth Amplifiers, here to ensure you get your awesome ideas into action to grow and improve your business and achieve your full potential. Take the first step by visiting growthamplifiers.com and clicking the Start Here button. Take the assessment to get your personalized score. Then select from free resources to learn how to improve your score. Don't wait. Be proactive and take action now by visiting growthamplifiers.com and clicking the Start Here button. And always keep on amplifying. Now, let's get back to the show. And you could see now that if you're tuning in, your average CPA who may be doing a really good job at making sure your numbers are in order. Maybe they're doing a really good job making sure that you're compliant. Your average accountant is not necessarily proactively looking at each of these areas and working a plan to optimize and improve. And that's what Growth Amplifiers is all about. It's like finding the small little changes in several areas that could have a big impact on the result. And you don't know what you don't know. So that's why we're advocates for making sure that you're getting a fresh perspective and making sure that someone is looking at your blind side, making sure someone is helping you see, identify the bottlenecks that you may be having, and then have a clear plan to take action to avoid that bottleneck, to resolve it, to make sure that you're continuing to grow and improve. So there's a lot of things that someone could do. We just covered, there's a lot of things you could focus on. What might be an action step or something a first step for someone who maybe they haven't addressed some of the things that you mentioned? What might they consider to do? Because I know for myself, when I started to learn more about what I didn't know, it became a little overwhelming. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many things I don't know.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, so there's a couple of things probably that come to mind. I mean, at some point, like you said, there are things you don't know, and so you're going to need that fresh perspective or an analysis, or just a conversation with somebody. But I mean, most of the time we know if there are issues, we just don't know where to go to solve them or how to solve them, right? And so first and foremost is finding people that know your industry, that are doing this and doing well at it, financial analysis and can look at, because like we're talking about, this whole system, everything's interconnected, and so much of it in the financial services world, I really feel like the financial services industry as a whole is broken for small business owners, because everything's so siloed. We have a bookkeeper, we have maybe an accountant, maybe somebody else does the taxes. We have, financial advising over here. We go to a management consultant who are great with practice management and digging down into like the minutia, the very core action steps for that business. And they have their place as well, but they're not always like financial analysts, tax experts, folks like that. But I mean, the first steps, if I'm thinking about this and saying like, what would I do on my own? First and foremost, it is making sure that number one, you're working with good data. I was going to say, I had to back up for a sec, because I was going to say, just get real with your numbers and figure out and take a look at, what's your, not only what's your like things like revenue growth and the bottom line on your P&L, which most people don't really understand how to interpret, but it's, make sure, see what your free cash flow has been. How's your bank account balance actually been growing over the past couple of years in relation to your revenues? If your revenue is going up, if you look at your balance sheet, your assets are going up, but your cash flow is dwindling, there better be a reason for that. You better know why. So you can start to do some of these like really simple self-assessment items. Take a look at your cash flow, how much you've been able to pay yourself. Are you able to fund growth, or have you had to take on debt? If you had to take on debt, especially for like basic overhead operating expenses, that's a warning sign. That's a pretty big warning sign that we're not covering at least the general operations. So number one, just it is all going into just being really truthful with your numbers, and just take a big look have your business take a look in the mirror, and you as the owner for managing that and saying, how are we really doing? Because a lot of times, again, I get there too, right? But that's why I have coaches and consultants and mentors on my team, because I'll get into the weeds of things and be super busy, and the revenue is growing, and maybe even the cash of the bank account is swelling, but there's other things that I should be paying attention to that is just, I have a hard time saying, because it's hard to be objective with ourselves, right? It's nearly impossible. So
you look at a team, right? A successful championship team. They don't just have one coach, right? They have a team of coaches coming together to look at different aspects. And so like getting a board of advisors to look at the different aspects of their business and making sure, you maybe not engage with a whole team, a board of advisors at one time, but you could say, all right, I need to focus on this area right now. So let me connect with someone, let me get a fresh perspective, let me get that tight. And then maybe I work on another area. But I want to just advocate for the people who are tuning in, because I see this challenge. Sometimes people start getting into their mind that coaching or advising is for people who are having challenges, and not necessarily for people who are already doing good. And I think that's a big myth that holds people back, because it's for everyone. It's for successful people as well. Everyone has a blind side.
Yeah, for sure. And that blind side, I mean, and sometimes it could be something that's small, that hits you small. I mean, sometimes it's when you're talking about blindside, and of course I'm going to think about a football analogy. So sometimes that blindside is going to come through and just, push you out of the pocket for a bit, and then you can recover. And other times it's going to sack you, and you're going to have a broken femur and miss the rest of the season, or maybe end your career, right? And then there's everything in between. And so, knowing, and I've seen it happen. And it's one of those things when you talk about the really, the worst case scenarios, right? used to be the worst case scenario was think of something that's going to shut your business down for months outside of your control, and people had a hard time conceptualizing that until we all went through the pandemic together.
Wow.
Now it's a very easy thing to conceptualize, right? But the same is true with just a single thing or a single scenario that's going to sink a business or at least severely impact its performance over time. And so being able to avoid a lot of those little missteps. It only takes. We've all heard the analogy about starting from New York with a plan to fly to LA. And if we start out just with, just 1 degree off of our trajectory, then by the time we get across country, that is a huge gap and a huge difference. And a huge, for us in business, that refers to huge loss of time, energy, money. And those are the time and energy are things that we can't get back or have a redo on, right?
And that's that you mentioned, just a small little 1 degree can put you in a completely different city, maybe even a different state, depending on where you're leaving from and where you're going to. So I appreciate some of the knowledge and expertise you've been sharing, giving an awareness, again, that it takes really looking at holistically the different aspects of your business, identifying maybe this is a small thing. It's not a huge thing. It's a small thing. But over time, the impact that can have can be huge. So Eric has a website, ProWiseFinancial.com. On the website, he has information, content. He does offer consultations as well. Eric, if you want to give a quick shout out, share of what people can expect on your website if they want to learn more about you and what you do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our website split out into 2 parts. We do have a heavy focus on independent optometrists, but I work with professional service providers of all types. We have coaches and consultants and marketing agencies and attorneys and a lot of folks like that. So you'll see it kind of take you into 1 or 2 spots, and then when you get there, you can learn a little bit more about this approach that I call financial harmony, which is getting all of these systems to work together harmoniously, right? All of it with moving towards a common goal, which are your goals. However you define prosperity in your life, that's what we're searching for. I mean, that's what we're working towards. And so, when folks go there, they can set up a quick call. My contact info is pretty out there as well. I always entertain, connections, questions, things like that. So, feel free to either, and if you reach out and with a question or something, I likely have a free resource that I can send back to you to give you some guidance, even before we jump on a call. So, if you have questions, not quite sure where to start, or if you're ready and raring to go, you can set up a quick call, and we can spend 15 or so minutes and just see if you're somebody I could help.
Excellent, Eric. Thank you for sharing that. And I encourage you, Amplifiers, it never hurts to get a fresh perspective, to get someone to look over kind of what you're doing. If you gained one idea that can help you just make a small change, it could put you in a completely different place. So Eric, one of the traditions we have Growth Amplifiers when we're ending these sessions is if you could share just something you've gained on your journey that might help others on theirs. It doesn't have to be related to your industry. It could be just something that you feel from the gut that would be helpful to others on their journey.
That's a good question. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is something that is a couple of things that my business consultants always remind me of. Seems like we always come back around to these couple of things, which is what, and they're again, they're tried and true statements, but it's because they're tried and true, right? So it's what got you here won't get you there, and especially in the context of what we're talking about here today, which is a lot of times some, focusing on compliance activities and not having a true partner come alongside you that can take a look over your financials and help you guide the strategy. that'll get you so far, right?
Mhm.
But it won't get you to where you could go. That's what I'd say there. And just remember that everything you want is just outside your comfort zone. I've got a big sign up that that says that, because I constantly got to be reminded of that myself. So, yeah,
I like that one. That's a new one. Everything you want is just outside your comfort zone. You got to step outside your comfort zone. You got to take a little bit of risk, and that's how we grow, right? Sometimes people will let that fear prevent them from taking that risk. And they're like, well, what if it doesn't work? Well, then you'll learn. But if you do nothing, you won't benefit if it works, and you won't benefit from learning. So you benefit zero. So take a risk. Get outside of that comfort zone. I love it. Thank you, Eric.
You bet.
All right, Eric, thank you for being a rockstar professional. If you've just tuned in to Growth Amplifiers for the first time, make sure that you follow, connect with us. We are on YouTube. We have a podcast. You can go to growthamplifiers.com/connect or look us up on YouTube. We appreciate you and what you do. Keep on amplifying. To show your support, take a moment to amplify this message by sharing it online. To connect with me or gain more business growth insights, visit www.growthamplifiers.com. Thank you for your support.